In this video, we're going to go through the steps of a muscle contraction. In order to make sure that you're able to move your muscles, two main things are going to be needed, okay? You're going to need calcium, okay? Calcium is going to be really important for initiating muscle contraction. And you're going to need ATP. This is your energy source. In the next video, we'll talk about where this energy can come from in your body. So first, let's quickly review a sarcomere, okay? Remember, your muscles are made up of many of these sarcomeres that line up on the myofibril, okay? There's many of them and they all line up. The ends of the sarcomere, this blue line here, okay? This line here and this line, these are called the Z lines. Attached to the Z line, this red stuff, okay, these little red fibers, these are actin. And actin, also known as the thin filament, because they're thin. They're a type of myofilament. Then in the middle, these orange looking guys, right here in the middle, this is myosin. Myosin is also known as the thick filament because they're thicker. Now, when your muscle is relaxed, okay, when you're sitting relaxed, this is what the muscle looks like. There's a big gap between this actin and this one, okay? So you see this big gap here in the middle. That's how you know the muscle is relaxed. When the muscle is contracted, so when you tighten and contract a muscle, that gap disappears. The actin come together here. Okay, so you can see the actin comes together. The way the actin comes together, if you look at the myosin here, I like to say it has these little golf clubs. Okay, myosin has these little golf clubs hanging off of it. And what's going to happen during a contraction is myosin is going to use its little golf clubs to pull actin in. So this myosin on this end and this myosin on this end are going to pull the actins together toward the middle during a muscle contraction. So let's walk through the steps of a muscle contraction. There's a few steps. The first step of a muscle contraction. Now here's your muscle. All right, let's say this is one of your muscle cells. Now attached to all of your muscle, you have nerve cells, neurons, okay? So there's a lot of neurons that are because nerve cells control your movement. So these are little neurons, all right? Now let's say you want to flex your bicep. Your brain tells your muscle to flex, all right? So what happens is, in the first step, a signal travels through the neuron to tell your muscle to move. So signal travels through neuron. And when that signal reaches the end of the neuron is going to release some neurotransmitters here. Okay, so these neurotransmitters are going to get released to tell the muscle to move. This neurotransmitter, okay, neurotransmitters are what your neurons release to tell your body to do stuff. So the neurotransmitter to tell a muscle to contract is called acetylcholine. Acetylcholine, or ACH. So the signal travels through the neuron. Acetylcholine is released from the neuron. It's released into this little gap. And this little gap between the neuron and the muscle is called the neuromuscular junction. Neuromuscular junction is that space between the neuron and the muscle. And then the muscle cell will take up that acetylcholine signal. So the muscle cell is now signaled to move. All right, and here's a picture from the PowerPoint. You can see the neuron here. There's a lot of neurons attached to your muscle. Acetylcholine, this little green stuff, gets secreted, and it's going to bind at the acetylcholine receptor in your muscle. And that's the first step. Okay, your muscle now has received that signal. The second step. Once your muscle has received that acetylcholine signal, the next thing that's going to happen is calcium is going to be released from your sarcoplasmic reticulum. Remember, the sarcoplasmic reticulum in the muscle stores calcium. So when your muscle receives that acetylcholine signal, it tells the muscle to secrete calcium. That's a huge step. All right, so calcium gets released into the muscle. Okay, let's go back to our sarcomere now. Now, right now, our sarcomere is still relaxed, okay? And the golf clubs haven't started pulling the actin in yet. And here's why. Now, this purple is our actin filament, okay? Now, when actin is in a relaxed state, there's these little green and blue things here that are wrapped around the actin. The green thread here is called tropomyosin. So tropomyosin is wrapped around the actin, and right now it's blocking the myosin from being able to bind. So it's blocking that myosin. The myosin golf club can't attach with this big chunky thing, tropomyosin, in the way. The blue, this thing, is called troponin. So troponin are these little proteins that are hooked up to the tropomyosin. So they're hooked on the tropomyosin. So while your muscle is in a relaxed state, troponin and tropomyosin are blocking the myosin from attaching and pulling the actin inward. It can't do that. But remember, calcium has just, this little orange stuff is the calcium. Okay, calcium has just been released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. When calcium gets released, it actually will stick to the troponin. So calcium will stick onto the troponin, and when this happens, it's going to pull the thread, that tropomyosin thread, away. So it pulls tropomyosin away. And now that golf club can hook up. The myosin and the actin can hook. The myosin hooks onto the actin. And what it's going to do when it hooks to the actin is it's going to pull the actin inward. And that's going to lead to a muscle contraction. In order to pull the actin in, the myosin needs a lot, and I'm not talking a little, I'm talking a lot of ATP, energy, to contract the muscle. So let's review one more time with this animation, okay? Signal travels down the neuron. This purple stuff is the acetylcholine released from the neuron. Okay, the acetylcholine will bind to your muscle cell. Now, the muscle receives this signal and it's going to secrete calcium. Calcium gets secreted from your sarcoplasmic reticulum. Calcium binds to troponin and it shifts the tropomyosin out of the way. And now myosin will move the actin inward and you get a muscle contraction. I know it's really hard for me to draw out everything that's going on, so I did put a link to a nice video here on Blackboard. So go in and watch that one to see a nice animation of this whole process.